All right. All right, hey fam, in this training I'm going to teach you a little bit about the core and how you're going to train your core and how we can design some quick and easy workouts, all about training your abdominals, not just the six-pack muscles, but also just understanding of what your core is, and the abdominal muscles in general is what I'm going to break down in this video. So the core is more like a cylinder, right? Like if we're talking about core when we come down to like stability and like strength in your holding your spine and keeping your trunk stable, because you think everywhere else around your body pretty much has bones, right? And then there's a gap between your pelvis and like kind of your rib cage and up into your shoulders where there's not really any support. It's just your spine hanging up and down, right? And so you have a lot of extra muscles around your trunk and torso that is protecting all of your organs and protecting your spine and creating stability and strength, because there's not a lot of bones going on in there. There's like a gap, right? So that is what I'm talking about when I say the core. The core is that stabilizer. Now it's a bit like a Coke can or a can of whatever. It doesn't have to be a Coke can. It's basically like a can, right? So on the bottom, you've got your pelvic floor muscles. On the top, you have your diaphragm, which is the muscles, the big domey muscle that is sitting here, and it helps you to breathe as well. And that's why breathing's a huge component of stability when you're training. So we've got the pelvic floor, we've got our diaphragm, and then we've got all the muscles around it. We've got the transverse abdominis, which is like the muscle that you can see here that goes from the back, wraps around to the front and touches on this. So it's kind of like a corset muscle. When it tightens, it kind of creates a bit of a corset effect on your body. Then we've also got the internal and external obliques, and they kind of cross over on perpendicular angles to kind of wrap around and again create that corset effect. And then finally, we've also got the rectus abdominis, which is the six-pack muscle. It doesn't contribute as much to core stability because it's more crunching your like hips to your ribs and your hips. It does trunk flexion, so it's not contributing as much to core stability as the other muscles that I mentioned before. So when we want to create really strong stability when we're doing lifting, we want to have all those muscles active and tense, and that's why when we breathe, we tense, breathe, we fill that can up, and it creates this strong, solid foundation. Whereas if we had an empty can with a pop, like with a hole in it, you could step on it and you could squish it. So that's the idea of we breathe in to fill the can up, all the muscles are tight, and that locks us in for nice, strong stability. That's why when we're lifting, we're like, brace, right? So that kind of gives you an idea of the core and stability. So there's ways we can train for core stability, and then there's ways that we can train for our six-pack muscles. And so if you want like a tight and toned waist, you don't want to overtrain your obliques too much because we don't want them to get really thick. We want to train them in a way that helps with stabilization, but not necessarily for hypertrophy. And then we want, like, say, the six-pack muscles, we want to grow them for hypertrophy. So there's different ways that we can train for all of these things. So you'll see in your programming, like I often do, you know, dead bugs, hollow holds, planks. They're really great for like more core stability and just like engagement of all those muscles and that bracing technique. So for example, when you're doing dead bugs, you're learning to brace all of your core muscles while still breathing. The idea is that you don't hold your breath when you do dead bugs. You want to be breathing as you're doing it. So you want to brace and hold, still be able to gently breathe, and then you're moving your arms and legs to try and kind of teach your brain to go, cool, when we act like have everything active, we can still move our arms and legs. And that's a very like low level movement that then brings up to like when you're squatting, when you're lunging, when you're deadlifting. All right, we can still move our arms and legs, but we can brace our core at the same time. And that's what we're kind of working towards here. So that's like why we might do some stabilization exercises. Planks are really good at training like your transverse abdominis and that tightening muscle, and helps to create that like core control. Now that core control also gives you that tight and toned look in your tummy, because if you're super relaxed and you just like flop out, that's when your tummy might just push out. And often that's a big thing. Ladies like, oh, my lower belly, like I can't get rid of it. And it's like, dude, it's probably just your posture and the way that you hold your core. And there's a big difference between fully relaxing in your tummy and just having a gentle activation of your transverse abdominis and obliques, and just having that gentle, like subtle, like activation and tone, and that's going to create that smaller waist look. That is another component of it. So planks and dead bugs and stuff like that helps you with that kind of exercise, right? And then we have our internal and external obliques. So totally don't need to know this, but just fun fact, if you want to know where your internal obliques are, pretend like you're putting your hands in your back pocket. That's kind of how they run, the fibers. And then if you want to know where your external obliques are, pretend like you're putting your hands in your front pocket, and that's kind of how they run there. So they cross over like that. Or another example is if I'm putting my hands in pretend it's my pockets, my front pockets, this is like how your external fibers run. And then if I go like this, that's going to be how your, if I go like this, it's how your internal fibers run. So they're perpendicular to each other, like that. Clearly I'm not flexible enough to do that with my hand right now. So they're like your kind of more stabilizing muscles. Now, if you were to do weighted, like heavy weighted rotational exercises, so say if you've got a cable and you're doing like heavy weighted wood chops in one direction and then in the other direction, that's where you're then training your oblique muscles to hypertrophy. Now, if that's what you want, maybe it's relevant to your sport, maybe it's relevant to your work kind of thing, then yes. But if you want a small waist, I don't do those. Don't do those because it's just going to help hypertrophy those muscles, and it's not what you want. It's going to make a thicker looking waist. So instead, we want to do hypertrophy training for our rectus abdominis muscles, which is trunk flexion, and either we do it from the top or we do it from the bottom. But basically, we want to get our ribs as close as we can to our hips. That's how we hit those muscles. Now, when it comes to hypertrophy of your abdominal muscles, it's no different than doing hypertrophy of any other muscle in your body. We're doing like recommended 8 to 12 reps ish, but it can be anywhere from 5 to 30 reps. But the idea is that you still need to be training to failure. You still need to prioritize progressive overload, and we still need to slowly increase the weight or increase the repetitions as they adapt just the same as any other muscle in your body. For the life of me, I don't know why body weight, everything has just been the thing for abs, because you feel the burn, but just because you feel the burn doesn't mean you're actually growing your abdominal muscles. You need to still focus on that progressive overload and adding weight and adding reps over time in order to get those muscles to hypertrophy and to pop up. And then as you drop the body fat and you grow in the muscles, then they're going to pop through the skin soon and you're going to have a six-pack. Is how it's going to look. So I'm going to jump into the app and I'm going to show you like how I've structured some of them. So these workouts, these little mini 3 exercise workouts, are all available in the on-demand section. And I'm just going to like explain to you how they're broken down so that you can choose different exercises and create your own based on how like you prefer as well, or what you've got available at the gym, because you'll see in some of them I've done some gym, some home. So that's basically how I'm going to break it down for you. So how I like to structure it, if you're doing a pure like little mini core workout, I like to do it just on how I described. We're going to do 2 trunk flexion movements, one where you're biasing your upper body coming down to your lower body, and one where you're biasing your lower body coming up to your upper body. And then I do some sort of stabilization core kind of training exercise, and that's it. That's all you need. 2 to 3 sets of each, even 2 sets of each exercise. Again, working till failure, whether it's 8 to 12, 10 to 15 reps. If you're going beyond 15 repetitions, just make it heavier, make it harder. So, for example, here you can see the dumbbell decline sit-up. So when you're doing the sit-up, the key is that you're not just like if you're like keeping your back straight and you just like fling up, you're going to use your hip flexors more than your abdominal muscles. So I want you guys to make sure that you're really curling and focusing on getting your ribs curled into your hips. You want to try and think like it's trunk flexion. You want to curl up and then slowly with control curl back down. It's more of a curling motion than it's like a sit-up motion, if that makes sense. And then you can make it harder by increasing the decline, because then it's like gravity's going to be involved, or holding a weight, and it's going to make it a little bit heavier, a little bit harder. So that's example number 1. And then example number 2 is the bent knee leg raise. I'll just get the video up. So this is a no-no. So in this one here, this guy's using his hip flexors like a lot. So what you want to do instead, he'll show you in a sec, is see how in this one, watch his lower back doesn't leave the thingamajig. So he's just literally doing hip flexion. He's not doing any trunk flexion here. So see, it's like it's just like an L. He's just getting hip flexion. And then if we watch the good one, wait till he gets all the way. Oh, sugar. Hang on. Sorry. When he gets to Let's see if I can get it to pause in the right spot. See, here. See the gap between his back and the pad? So what he's done is he's curling his hips all the way up into his ribs, so he's getting full trunk flexion. And then that way now he's actually using his abdominal muscles. So when he was just going to a straight leg thing, he's just using his hip flexors. You'll get a little bit of core activation, but you're not really training them properly. When you're doing this and you're curling up, these are bloody hard when you do them properly, because you're really curling that little bit extra up. That's when you're actually going to hit your abdominal muscles. So that's what you want to see when you're doing hanging leg raises, is that gap there. And it's not with momentum, it's him curling in his abdominal muscles to get it up like that. So that is another amazing example. So when you do this hanging without the elbow support, oh my God, it is so hard. And then another, and now an example of like an isometric holdy exercise is a Pallof press. So the thingy is, the cable or the band is going to try and pull you back this way, and you're simply just going to hold it and try and stay in that nice straight line and practice squeezing your pelvic floor, bracing in all of your tummy muscles, and then breathing. And in this one you can do we can add different things to make it more challenging, but it's just about holding that brace and support. Being conscious of we don't, this one, do an isometric hold, it's more about that core stabilization and awareness, as opposed to hypertrophy when you're looking at that one in particular. Now let's have a look at this one. So now here you can see the first exercise is a plank, so it's like that core stability, learning how to brace while still breathing in various positions. But we've got this straight leg hip raise, which this one, again, when done properly, is really bloody hard. And again, it's going from the lower body up to the upper body. So trunk flexion with the lower body up to the upper body focus. So this one, you start like this. I actually hold above my head. I find that a little bit more helpful. I do it with a squat rack or something to hold above my head. All the movement comes from is you're going to brace those tummy muscles, and you're going to just think of being try to pull it up. So you're like this, all you're trying to do is lift up to curl it up, and you'll see him do it here. All of that motion is coming from here. You don't even need to lift up that high, to be honest, because he's losing trunk flexion. I would just go get the grint, get the abdominal engagement here, and then slowly lowering down with control. All the movement is coming from your abdominal muscles. It's not with momentum. And so when you do these slow, they're so challenging and so effective that you can literally start with body weight. But this is a great option if you can't do hanging leg raises yet. This is a really awesome regression. And then you can see here a dumbbell crunch. One's really good for home because you don't really need much equipment. Again, when you're doing the crunch, the focus is going to be on curling the ribs up towards the hips and slowly lowering back down, and really focusing on engaging through those muscles, as opposed to flinging yourself up, because then you're going to use your hip flexors again. So when we want to train our abdominals, that's what we kind of want to think about. Let me have a look. Similar vibe. I think that's probably a good summation, to be honest. I think we can leave it there. So in conclusion, we want to remember that we want to focus on bringing our ribs to our hips and being in control, and then progressive overload, just like you would do with any other exercise when it comes to training your core. And I'm happy for you guys to try there's the cable crunch machine, you can do a cable curling crunch, but again, making sure that you're using your abdominals to pull it down in. You can use a ab machine. You can use the GHD, where you arch all the way backwards. That one's a killer because you're stretching, you're going into extension, you're stretching your abdominals, and then you're coming back up. So that's another option. So yeah, I'm happy for you to have a play with exercises, but that's kind of the fundamentals when you're building your core workout.